Harlem woke up that morning already late to the danger. Engines idled too long, doors opened too quiet. Men stepped out who didn't belong there. No badges, no warrants, just numbers, steel, and intention. 10 cars slid into the neighborhood like they'd rehearsed it. 50 men, faces hard, eyes empty. They weren't there to talk. They weren't there to scare. They were there to replace ownership. This wasn't a robbery. This was a transfer of power. By the time shopkeepers noticed the silence, the first doors were already coming off their hinges. Money flew, tables cracked. Hands that counted slips every morning were suddenly raised in surrender. The message moved faster than the violence. You don't work for yourself anymore. You work for someone else now. Harlem had rules. Everybody knew who ran what, who to pay, who not to cross. That balance had been built slow, brick by brick, favor by favor, and now it was being kicked in before breakfast. The man behind it wasn't from Harlem. He didn't grow up on these blocks. He didn't care who lived here or how they survived. He saw numbers. He saw cash. He saw a vacuum he thought could be filled with force, and force was his favorite language. While his crews spread out, breaking confidence along with bones, the man who actually held the city together sat across town, unaware the ground under him was already shifting. He didn't hear the first door splinter, didn't see the blood hit the sidewalk, didn't feel the pressure yet. But pressure has a way of traveling. By mid-morning, whispers were moving faster than the cars had. Corners went quiet. Runners stopped running. The kind of silence that only shows up when people know something bad is climbing toward them. And then one of his men walked in. Not talking, not angry, just bleeding. That's when the room changed. One look told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a dispute. This wasn't negotiation. This was a countdown. How many? Enough. 50 against 15 isn't a standoff. It's an execution waiting for permission. Everyone in that room knew it. Nobody said it out loud. That's when the woman at the bar stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for approval. She reached for a phone. Because when violence gets loud, the smartest move is to call someone who doesn't need to shout. And the name she dialed wasn't local. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't expected. But it was the only name that could stop what had already started. On the other end of that line was a man who hated surprises, hated chaos, and hated men who moved without asking. And in the next few minutes, he was going to hear about a war he never approved, happening in a city that couldn't afford one. The question wasn't whether blood would spill. The question was who would decide when. The phone rang where power lived quietly. No shouting. No panic, just interruption. He didn't like interruptions. The voice on the line didn't waste time pretending this was small. She laid it out clean. Cars, crews. Territory being swallowed in daylight. No warning, no permission. That last part mattered. He listened without speaking, already seeing the angles, not the bodies, the consequences. Harlem wasn't just blocks and buildings, it was heat. Too many eyes, too many civilians, too many reporters itching for headlines. A street war there wouldn't stay on the street, and worse, the man behind it hadn't asked. That was the real offense. Moves like this were supposed to be discussed, measured, approved. That was the whole point of structure. You don't build an empire so one hot-headed operator can light it on fire for pride. When the call ended, the decision was already made. Not emotional, strategic. He turned to the one man in the room who understood him without explanation. Get him on the line. It took time. The kind of time that lets damage multiply. When the voice finally came through, it was cheerful, confident. The voice of a man who thought momentum was the same thing as permission. He didn't match that energy. His tone stayed flat, controlled. The kind of calm that makes the other side uneasy without knowing why. Pull them out. Not a suggestion, a correction. The answer that came back was predictable. Pride wrapped in business talk. Claims of profit. Claims of inevitability. The idea that size alone decided ownership. That's when patience thinned. He explained it once, slowly. This wasn't about territory. It was about exposure. About cops, cameras, politicians looking for careers. One bad afternoon in Harlem could choke every operation in the city. Still resistance. So he sharpened it. This wasn't about loyalty or race or favors. This was about survival. The system protected everyone only if everyone respected it. Ignore that and the system turns on you. Silence filled the line. The kind that means calculations are happening. Finally, the concern surfaced. Backing down would look weak. That earned a pause. Weak wasn't pulling out. Weak was standing alone when everyone else voted you off the board. The math was simple. One neighborhood versus 5 families. One ego versus an entire structure. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten directly. He didn't have to. When the call ended, nothing was announced. No victory declared. No apology offered. But within the hour, engines started again. This time, they were leaving. Cars rolled back the way they came. Corners breathed again. Doors stayed standing. From the outside, it looked like nothing had happened. But everyone who mattered understood what that retreat meant. It meant someone higher had spoken. And somewhere in Harlem, a man with only 15 soldiers realized he just survived something that should have buried him. What he didn't know yet was that survival always comes with a price. The cars disappeared without ceremony. No speeches, no deals made in the street, just space reopening where pressure had been. People didn't celebrate, they watched. Because when violence stops too clean, it means something else stepped in. Inside, the man who'd been counting his losses before they arrived stood still, absorbing the silence. He didn't smile. He didn't relax. He understood something most didn't. You don't win when the storm misses you. You win when you understand why it changed direction. 2 days passed before the meeting happened. Neutral ground, no muscle, no show, just 2 men sitting where nobody expected trouble. The one who'd made the call arrived calm, almost bored. The other studied him carefully. This wasn't gratitude. This was assessment. No one spoke about loyalty. No one talked about friendship. They talked about lines. About what happens when someone crosses them. About who answers the phone when things get loud. The terms weren't written down. They didn't need to be. Run your city, keep it clean, keep it quiet. And when pressure comes from outside, you don't swing first. You call. In return, there was no tribute demanded. No percentage carved out, just respect. The kind that gets remembered when decisions are made behind closed doors. They shook hands once, that was enough. Across the river, the man who'd ordered the invasion wasn't done being angry. He told himself it was temporary, that things would swing back his way. That power always rewards the bold, but bold without control turns reckless fast. Over time, his moves got louder, his patience shorter. He stopped asking, started daring. That's how men end up alone. The structure he'd challenged didn't forget. It watched, it waited, it let him prove the point himself. And when he crossed a line no one was allowed to cross, the answer came quietly in a place where noise couldn't help him. No speeches. No credit taken, just removal. As for Harlem, it stayed standing, not because of force. Because someone smarter understood that domination brings heat but restraint builds longevity. Years later, when asked how he survived when stronger men didn't, the answer was always simple. Guns matter, numbers matter, but vision decides who stays breathing. That day, 50 men lost to 15 without firing a shot. Not because of luck, because someone higher chose order over ego. And the city remembered that decision long after the streets forgot the noise. What nobody saw was what that decision set in motion. Because power doesn't just stop violence, it rearranges futures. From that point on, every serious move in the city passed through a quieter filter. People started thinking twice before sending cars, before flexing numbers, before testing boundaries that suddenly felt guarded. Not guarded by guns, guarded by consequence. The man who'd held the line in Harlem learned quickly that protection isn't charity, it's alignment. You don't get shielded for free. You get watched, you get measured. Every decision you make becomes part of someone else's long game, and that was fine. He preferred it that way. Meanwhile, the structure above him grew colder. More efficient, less forgiving. It didn't need to show strength anymore. Everyone had seen what happened when someone skipped the rules. The lesson spread without being taught. No more loud invasions, no more daylight takeovers, no more acting alone. But peace like that is fragile. Because somewhere always there's another ambitious mind watching the board, convinced they're smarter than the men who built it. Someone who thinks history is a suggestion, not a warning. And when that person finally moves, they won't come with 50 men and 10 cars. They'll come quieter, smarter, closer. The city feels calm right now. Too calm, which usually means someone somewhere is already planning the next mistake. Calm never lasts in a city built on appetite. It only gives the patient one's time to sharpen their advantage. After Harlem, the lesson settled deep. Power didn't belong to the loudest crew or the biggest show of force. It belonged to the man who could stop violence without being seen stopping it. That's a dangerous kind of authority. Meetings changed tone. Favors carried more weight. Names were spoken softer, especially the one tied to that phone call, not out of fear, out of understanding, because anyone who can end a war before it starts can also allow one to happen. The man in Harlem adjusted. He tightened his circle, paid cleaner, moved slower. Strength wasn't about expanding anymore. It was about holding without shaking the ground. He became harder to replace. Across the city, others weren't as disciplined. Pride crept back in. It always does. Men who watched from the sidelines started believing the outcome could have gone differently if they were in charge. That belief is how mistakes are born. And somewhere not yet visible, the next confrontation was already forming. Not with engines and bats, with whispers, with alliances, with invitations that sounded harmless until it was too late to refuse. That's the real danger, not the men who kick doors in. The ones who smile, agree, and wait. Because the next threat to the balance wouldn't announce itself. It would arrive like an opportunity. And when it did, the same question would come back around, heavier than before. Who really controls the city? The men who take, or the ones who decide when taking ends?